Waka, everybody. I've learned that as a UPIC greeting that we use. I work with the UPIC Knowledge Fair, so Waka. Really grateful to be on UPIC lands here today. My name is Colleen Fisk. I'm the education director for the nonprofit Renewable Energy Alaska Project. I'm pretty sure I've now met every single one of you, but this is who I am. And it's really interesting. I was just talking with Tao right now, making the connection that, from Alaska, where we're both from Palmer, and he had my mom as a high school teacher. I did as well, because she's an amazing teacher, but that's just how Alaska works, right? So I grew up in Alaska, and I currently live on Denina Elmena lands, and really grateful to be in this position. I've been at REAP for about 6.5 years now. So if we go to the next slide, a little bit about us. You have not heard about REAP. We're a nonprofit, and we work statewide to increase clean energy. And we define clean energy as efficiency and renewables in like these kind of 4 buckets that we talk about of collaboration, education, training, and advocacy. Of course, all of those overlap each other. And my focus is in the education. So I do K to gray education, is what I say. So my background is in high school education. I did my master's in education through UAF, and I did my student teaching also at Palmer High, because why not? That's how you do it. Not with my mom, by then she retired. But I did do my student teaching there. And so I have that background in education and the high school education. Already? Okay. Okay.
That's hard. You have my ringer off. Apologize.
I'm like, ooh, I think mine's on sale too. And so I do, so that's kind of my background and my training and my passion, but I really enjoy all education. So I have worked with pre-kindergarten all the way through, I will not say all the way to what age. We don't need to define numbers, age is just a number, but all ages, right? And so I do teacher trainings. We provide classroom kits. We have STEM competitions. I'll talk a little bit more about all of those. But the way that REAP sees clean energy, and we want to advance this in the state for all of the many wonderful reasons that we've heard from a lot of people today, starting out with that wonderful presentation by Rick Toman. So don't need to tell you the why, but this is how we see the how. Okay, and so we see the how is through technology. You have to have the technology to be able to do it, the heat pumps, right? The electric snow machine, we have to have the solar panels. Or at least not have to, but that is one piece of it. And we have, you need the funding to be able to make that happen. We need the policy, and then we need the people. So cue the star, Tav. Yes, thank you. So we have the people. And so of course that's the realm where I work, is in the people. So, and I did mention this already, but of course we are on Indigenous lands anywhere that we are. We're on Indigenous lands, and want to be considering this, especially as we talk about resources, because as the state, we have kind of a poor history of thinking of this as very extractive. And so we want to be thinking about this in terms of these are resources that have been sustainably managed for thousands and thousands of years. So how can we learn from that and continue to do that and work with people so that we maintain that sustainability and recognize that this is where we are. And so again, I grew up and live, work on Denina Elmena, and we're here today on UPIC lands. And we work statewide across all of these Indigenous lands. And so one of the frameworks that we use, so let me step back for a second and say, the purpose of this presentation, I think I titled it Interdisciplinary Outreach in K through 12, because that is really where we talk about is interdisciplinary. And I've given similar presentations to this in the past, and I've talked about it through the lens of energy. And of course, I still will talk about that through the lens of energy, because that is my organization and my current expertise. But what I want to make the argument today is that energy is everything. It is interdisciplinary inherently. And so how can we think about this? And maybe I can give you some tools to think about this in your own outreach, especially if you maybe are feeling a little bit down from some depressing climate presentations today, and you want to be thinking about some ways that you can do some more within your own work maybe I can give you a few tools or spark some ideas for incorporating that in your own outreach or your own work. Outreach is a very, very broad term that could be talking to your niece. Okay, it is an outreach experience. So whatever that means to you. And so I say this is the purpose of the presentation, is thinking about this in a very interdisciplinary, cross-content, whatever word you want to use to explain that in many different ways. And the US Department of Energy has these energy literacy principles that I think show this interdisciplinary work, because it can start out in maybe a very sciencey type of way, Western science type of way of energy, physical quantity that follows precise natural laws, right? But all the way to thinking about quality of life in individuals and societies is affected by our energy choices. And so if you want to dig more into these, this is a website, cleannet.org, that talks about climate, and there's also climate literacy principles if you're not familiar with those. So if you're interested in more of that, cleannet.org is a great website. Kind of learn more about those principles and resources for teaching about it as well. So energy education is interdisciplinary. So what I want to do is turn to a neighbor and say, what's one way that you use energy in your life? And don't think about energy necessarily. I want you to try to think really broadly about this. So not just the electricity that you turn on in the room. Obviously, yes, that is a great example. I don't mean to dissuade you from that, but see if you can kind of think outside the box for a second. Turn to a neighbor or two and try to think of a couple of ways of how we think about energy. Give you a minute for that. Yes. That's a good one. You're not. Okay, yeah. You're on the, I don't know where the mic is.
Right now.
On, please throw it in the chat. I don't know how many we've got online. Something in the chat. You're online. Chat too. Okay. So I was asking for some input from the chat as well, but on the count of three, I want everyone to just say one word. 1, 2, 3. Coffee. Food, coffee. Shout out something. Airplanes, great. Okay, so energy, like there's so much that is around us that thinks about energy. And of course, you know, I want to think about this. So if you kind of click through a few times, we have a kind of a list here. So of course we have the science of energy, but also want to, the history and ethics of energy access, of course, is really important. Climate change causes and solutions, of course. How about the social science of energy? Biological energy, you can think about food energy. I mean, the entire time I'm listening to salmon talks, I'm like, about that food, right? Let's talk about food access, energy, our traditional ecological knowledge and wisdom, the math of energy. I mean, this list could just go on, right? Like, it's not, oftentimes when I'm reaching out to a school or classroom, they're saying, okay, well, I'll see if our science teacher is interested in that. You know, and I'm like, okay, well, it doesn't have to be just the science teacher. Okay, we could talk about, you know, there's a lot of different ways that I can connect this in for whoever's interested. So I think you click one more time. I have one more, yeah. So here's a picture, and I say, what energy do you see here? And so hopefully we all can see the solar panels, but there's a lot more going on here, right? That is related to our life than just the solar panels. You can talk about better energy of the homes. You can talk about the photosynthesis of the trees. You can talk about the cultural significance of the mountain. You know, I mean, there's a lot of things that you can think about going on there. And did we get a few things in the chat?
Not one.
Oh.
Lack of energy.
Energy. Maybe I'm just not that interesting. I got it. Okay. So I forgot that one had a fun slide one. All right. So how do we teach about energy in Alaska? So these are some of the ones that we use. Obviously, they're not all encompassing. There's a lot of things that you could use to teach this, most especially traditional knowledge. But these are the ones that we use. So you notice that my slide deck is AIC Energy Smart. So most of the funding for my position comes from this program called AIC Energy Smart, which is funded from Alaska Housing Finance Corporation and focuses on energy efficiency. And I'm pushing them a little bit more on to include some more like renewables and general sustainable energy living within that curriculum. And then there's also this program called Wind for Schools. And so that's mostly we think about the wind and solar, but really all renewable energy education. And there's a couple resources for that. Then there's this national resource, but this AIC Energy Smart is really Alaska specific. So next slide. So here's AIC Energy Smart. This is, and all these resources are free and available for anybody to use. So you don't have to register, you don't have to like email me. Of course, I encourage you to email me and talk about this, but you do not have to. So you can always just go online and check any of this stuff out. And so this is, again, from Alaska Housing Finance Corporation. And it's thinking about, awareness of our energy, hopefully an awareness of this energy all around us, and the importance of taking measures to use energy wisely. So it is very much about this efficiency and conservation. We have them broken down in K through 2, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12. Also have a couple adult education resources on there as well. And then one of the cool things we do with AIC Energy Smart is we do this Power Pledge Challenge. So we partner with utilities and communities to come and visit their classroom, teach about energy, kind of give this basics of how to use energy. We bring like these little electricity monitors around and say, let's measure electricity and how do we calculate that cost? And this picture of us in one of our visits in Palmer, I think is what that one is, because that's how nerdy I am about Palmer. So it's really fun. I think my next slide is Power Pledge slide. Oh, no, that's okay though. So it's really fun. And I think I have some numbers on another slide about that. And then Wind for Schools, there's 12 states, I think maybe up to 13 now. And there's 7 turbines, like these small Skystream 1 kilowatt wind turbines that are installed at schools around the state, including Nome, there's one in Anchorage, a few in the Valley, one down in Sitka and in Juneau. So they're kind of around the state. Back when, in like 2011, when the national government had a bunch of money, so they gave money to put in these. But really what it is now is just an outreach program. So let's teach about renewables and schools. And there's nonprofit repowering schools that help support that outreach. And so as part of that, we do KidWind. And so this is a national competition. We just had it on Saturday, was the in-person competition. I believe was, my coworker Tyler, he is currently taking virtual presentations right now for students across the state, probably as I speak. And so this is where students build model wind turbines. At the in-person event, they test them in a wind tunnel. They present their design to judges, and there's a knowledge test. And so then the top teams, there's a 4 or 5 grade category, a middle school and high school category. The top teams from that can go to the national competition. So last year, we had teams who went to the competition, and we've had them actually the last several years. We've had teams go to national competition and be in like the top 5 and get special awards. So very proud of our Alaska teams. And we should have 4 teams who are traveling this year as well. And then here's the NEED curriculum. Again, it's just another resource. They have a lot of curriculum. So if it's something like, oh, I want to share a curriculum resource with a teacher, this is like a good thing to send them to, but not very Alaska specific. Okay, and the next slide. So that's kind of the here's some of the online free resources. That's what we're using them, but obviously that can only get us so far, right? We really need to be thinking about how are we doing this in culturally responsive way. And so one of the ways that we've been really working on improving is really incorporating and braiding Indigenous knowledge, elders and leaders within any of the work that we do. So I mentioned I've been working with Yupik knowledge bearers, part of our work as one example, and trying to work with other cultures as well. I will be working with them, but I've only started really diving deep in with her and hoping to dive in deep with others as well. And what we've always done though is really focus this on place-based. So getting students to okay, so as a Power Pledge challenge, one of the things that the winning schools get is they get a tour of their power plants, right? So we've had that here in Dillingham where they got a tour of the Nuyakuk power plant. And so like when I did a training here last time I was here for WAISC in 2019, I did a training with a couple of teachers and we went to the power plant, right? So we're like doing this, like, what do we know about here? Like right here, what is going on? What do you guys know? What can you teach me? You know, what is it that you already know? What are the resources that we have here and making it sense? Not like, let's talk about a nuclear power plant in Pennsylvania. You know, like that's not super helpful. So really thinking about that, thinking about the school as a laboratory, you know, meeting with those local experts, such as a school facility manager. And then of course, energy is interdisciplinary. Have I convinced you of that yet? So thinking about this in terms of course, ASAP and others of like the food, energy, water nexus is an example. They had those like microfuse, you know, research and all of that, but everything else, you know, relating to local ecosystems, whether that's the Bristol Bay salmon run or the hydro plant in Nuyakuk, or, you know, whatever that is thinking about that locally. And so then the next thing is that this is how we do this. And of course, we have our why. One of the main reasons of the why is that climate change, but there's other, you know, things that we might want to impact. And this is something that I found really helpful to think about this 4 levels of action for societal change. A lot of times we think about our individual actions. So, okay, well, I'm going to turn off the lights, right? Or I'm not going to drive somewhere, or I'm going to do this thing. And we also have this impact of, well, I am going to convince, you know, Senator Murkowski to do whatever when she was on the energy committee, right? Energy and resources committee. So, and it can feel both of the, like, this can feel super overwhelming and our individual action can feel really not impactful. But there's a lot of things that's in between. And so we can have those. And so this is what we want to do as part of our education outreach, is we want to empower people to do, yes, individual action, but also talk with your family and friends. When I say, hey, next time you do outreach with your niece or whoever that is, like, you know, talk, or your grandparents or whatever, you know, all of this is, maybe you can share some of the information that you've learned from this conference, share some of those resources, you know, start, you know, working with a lot of us already doing this, of course, but again, you know, working with your community, local institutions. And yes, you have our economy, policy, and laws. That's what I have my box for, right? Chris Rose goes to Juneau and DC, and I don't have to. So very grateful for that. I love coming to Dillingham for WASC, not so much Juneau to talk to politicians. So if you want to think more about this in terms of levels of societal change, and I'm sure I'm not alone thinking about climate anxiety, I recommend these resources. These are a couple of videos that I found helpful. And so, oh, yep. And of course, I'm happy to share this presentation. Of course, you can always email me. I'm hoping that we can all share our presentations so we have these resources, but yes. Okay. So energy education. So here's some of our numbers. Again, what's a number? But you want to know some of the impacts that we've had. So last year we did 11 trainings for 230 educators. And we gave away 119 energy education kits. So we do a lot of put a kit into a flat rate box and send it to a teacher. We did, it was nice last year, we started doing a mix of in-person and virtual trainings, but anytime we do a virtual training, we ship teachers a kit. They're not just like sitting on a computer watching a video. We say, no, go do these activities, get outside and try this out. And then here's the Power Pledge Challenge. So 2022, it was 1,200 students reached in 10 regions, including here in Dillingham. The state prize was for Girdwood 6th graders, and we partnered with Alaska Energy Authority, Alaska Housing Finance Corporation, and 11 utilities across the state. And so our biggest year was 2019, we reached 4,000 students. So we're not quite back up to that same like numbers reached, but we've also changed it to where we are doing more with those students that we are reaching. So again, it's just a number, and I do feel like we've been able to reach more regions, so bigger area of the state. And it's not breaking my heart that I'm not hitting as much MATSU students as I'm getting to reach more of the, you know, as much as I love MATSU, you know, they're probably not the ones who need it quite as much. So, Next slide. So here's some of the lessons learned. We really need to be thinking about this collaboration. You know, like when I first started at REAP, it's just like, oh, wow, this is a lot for me to do, right? But guess what? It's not just me. It's all of us. We have all of these people who are working together. You know, I went through the Sustainable Energy Endorsement Program, taking a bunch of classes from Tom back in 2016, 2017. You know, we can all learn from each other, work with each other. And it's a very colonial thinking to be thinking of, I'm going to do this myself, right? So let's work together. Don't just try to think that you're doing it by yourself. And so we continue to improve and do better, certainly not perfect at all of this. And giving myself that grace, you know, to mess things up. Recognize that, you know, sometimes when I mess something up, I'm like, okay, how would I feel about if somebody else made this mistake? I'm like, well, it wouldn't be a big deal. So remember, it's okay if I give everybody else that grace. It's okay to give myself that grace and learn from it, but don't, you know, kill myself over it. And really the most time, like I mentioned with Power Pledge, we've shifted it to be more, you know, working with students over a longer period of time. So doing multiple things. We don't necessarily always visit them in person multiple times, but we're working with that teacher to do multiple types of activities with them. And we do try to do multiple in-person visits whenever we can. And then cross-program outreach, for example, the REAP has the Energy Transitions Initiative Partnership Project, not quite as long as BBC or CTE, but that's still a mouthful, working from Department of Energy. So programs, again, here in Dillingham, they're doing this sort of work, but also in Igiagig. And so Tyler, my coworker, is going to be going to Igiagig this fall. And so kind of that type of, you know, cross-program outreach, either with a REAP or other programs. And you know, we're still definitely have a lot of room for improvement. One of the most effective ways is really that we have found for outreach is really those district level types of partnerships. It's wonderful. And we build those relationships with teachers, but of course, we know those teachers turn over a lot. And so sometimes you can build that relationship with a teacher and then you send an email to the void that fall and nothing happens. So it's great outreach that you've done. And now I can't get in and my emails are going to other people's junk mails and they want more time, you know, and so, you know, it can be hard. And so if we can do better, I think we can do better at working at that district level, regional level, working with those other organizations within the region to do that. Okay. So yes, there we go. So yeah, let's work together, right? Or, you know, take some resources in your own outreach, maybe something that you can use, or maybe you've thought of some ways that we can work together. I really think that everything that you all are doing has something to do with energy, whether or not has anything to do with my work, but certainly has something to do with energy. And so I hope that you do reach out. Oh, we are hiring someone. Actually, we have 3 positions open at REAP right now. But one of them, I don't care about those other 2 because they're not working with me. I want someone to work with me this summer as an education contractor. So if you know somebody who'd like to work with me this summer, you know, and I'm open for questions. Yes, Devin. Oh yeah. Okay. It's, yeah, the job education contract. We had someone to do this for the first time last year. We paid someone for the summer to do like work on our curriculum, help us with our summer camp, and we do like 2 or 3 different summer camps, 3 this year, summer camps, and helping us improve curriculum and other outreach that we do in the summer.
Does the person have to be located in Anchorage or can be remote?
We are, so the person who worked with us last year can do remote work with us. And so any of that kind of remote stuff, we really need like an extra set of hands helping us with some of those summer camps, which is, you know, preferably that would be in Anchorage. We have we have a summer camp in Fairbanks and 2 in Anchorage. So yeah. Other questions, thoughts too? Must be just questions. All right.
We need to get in touch.
Absolutely.
Okay. Good afternoon. I haven't met you already. I think I've met at least 50% of you. I'm Sean. I'm visiting from Fairbanks, and I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I've worked at UAF for 8 years, and I always thought like when I go out for rural campuses, I'm gonna see things, and I've just been stuck in Fairbanks. So it's like, I was really eager to come out here and, breathe the air and feel the can. I'm just glad to be able to share some of the work that we've been doing in online course design. So I'm the Media and Innovation Manager at eCampus. It means that I help faculty make videos and things, and I also manage our edX consumption. So I'm going to talk about connecting local issues to global audience through edX. We're going to define an edX course, talk about what Alaska X is, our presence on this platform, discuss the audience. You're connecting to a global audience. Who are they? What does that mean? How do you anticipate that? And then we're going to have a look into a couple of the courses, have graciously become a student in one of them, and we'll show us how it works. So an edX course, all of ours, we have 28 now. They're MOOCs. This term's been around for about 11 years. It stands for Massive Open Online Course. So to take a course sit through UAF online, it's going to be online. It's not going to be massive, right? There's going to be an enrollment cap. Ours are scalable to the point of, we could have 1 million learners theoretically. We don't, but the course is built to scale to that degree. They're open, they're accessible, not just in the sense that anyone can sign up for them without going through a registration process, but they're also accessible in the sense that folks will have screen readers, need captions for accessing videos. That is, they all meet that level of quality. They're also all free to a degree via this audit track. And that basically gets you all the content, but you don't get a grade. You want to prove to someone, an employer, that you've done the course. That costs a little bit of money for the verified track. Now, these don't grant credit. They're non-credit bearing courses, but the certificate that they give you is verifiable and can be shared on LinkedIn or a resume or something like that. The edX mission was founded by Harvard and MIT in 2012. It's a very altruistic sounding mission, and it's to, increase access to high quality education everywhere. And I'll show you kind of how that actually plays out in terms of who the audience is from different countries across the world. And then our mission at Alaska X, which is really just, it's called a moniker. Who is UAF on this platform? Yes, we're the University of Alaska Fairbanks, but we have this separate brand of owning really the space of leadership in Arctic, northern latitude, circumpolar research. So it's, we do get some revenue from it, but it's also this really bold branding exercise. I don't know how many of you listen to Board of Regents meetings, state universities. I try to avoid them. But a lot of the things you hear Regent Seekins or whoever else say is, how can we communicate to people what's going on up here? Up here being the Chatuda campus. And this is one way to do it. People are discovering our institution through these courses. We even got some feedback of people saying, like, I wanted to know more about the campus. I wanted to know, like, really, we kind of thought that you wouldn't be interested in that. So folks do come and achieve like a positive sense of the other offerings that we have. And the hope is that that's this wide net, and some people come to us for our other programs that are, more lucrative in the sense of tuition revenue. So these numbers are a bit old, but this is how many people edX has reached across the world. So it's this number here that you can really think of how many learners have an account on edX.org and are active in some sense. If you go to edX.org, it'll always say, like, 650,000 learners learning right now. And that's how many people are logged in at that one moment. Maybe they're, who knows how much work they're really doing, but they're actually logged in. And we're one of 156 global partners, most of which are nonprofit higher education institutions. Some companies like IBM put data science courses up there, but it's pretty much a group of higher ed institutions. This is us. These numbers are from yesterday, and this is cumulative over about 2.5 years. And it wavers. It's, a couple 500, 600 a week. But the interesting thing about this, I mean, who's taken the UAS course? Who has looked at that ad, the drop deadline? Where you're like, right? Right? And we take a course based on, maybe we contact the instructor, we read the syllabus, we have a sense of some kind of need or interest. The way edX does that is the opposite. You get into the course, you look at the content, you see what value is there for you. You can even do all of it. And then at the very end, you can say, you know what? Yeah, actually, I do want to validate this experience. Here's $149, and you get a certificate. And so we don't have a mechanism to force people to pay for our courses. It's all voluntary after they've sort of walked in and tried it. And so about almost 8% of those people choose to pay for it, which when we first became a partner, edX said, oh, it'll be about 2.5%. And so I'm really proud of that because it means that there's some valuable things in the eyes of the audience of the learners that have been created. When we built a course called Remote Sensing of Wildfires, Dr. Santosh Panda had it. He had done these in-person trainings for high school students throughout the state. And the pandemic happened and he couldn't do these in-person trainings anymore. So he wanted to kind of just translate that to an online course. And we thought, this is great. We'll reach out to high school teachers across the state. We'll make the course, there's no time limit on how long you can access it. Open the course, and over the first course of the year, do you know how many people in the course had a high school diploma or less? Like 4%. We're like, oh, that's not who our audience was. That wasn't a problem. It just wasn't what we were thinking. So edX as a platform is full of these people who are like, they want something that's marketable and valuable and useful, and they want it to be like a discrete late chunk experience. They want to take a course in 4 weeks or get a professional certificate in 3 months and take that to it, put it on their resume, take it to an employer, ask for a raise. A lot of the learners in some of our courses are applying to graduate school, and they want to show some kind of initiative in a certain skill area, particularly GIS, some of the courses that we have. And I think the next slide shows that. But some of these people are they just want to learn. In our salmon, there's a course called Salmon People in Place. I'll put the slide later on. There was a woman in the course taking it. She was a retired woman from some county west of London in the UK. And she discovered through this course that there used to be salmon in these rivers of the UK, like Atlantic salmon, and it was so long ago that it had been forgotten, and she kind of incorporated that into her discussions and her interactions in the course, and that was just a wholesome sort of thing to witness. But she wasn't there to get a job based on her participation. So I mentioned the GIS course. This is we have a course called GIS Foundations. The first run had about 7,000 people enrolling. You can see folks who have some kind of a degree, that's about 80% or more in that course. A lot of people applying to a master's in health science, and they want to be able to understand the basics of GIS that they might apply to that specific field later on. So these courses are for so that's the audience, right? So when you design a course, you can anticipate a certain level of, and of course you can have prerequisites. You can say you need to have this level of skill or take this course before you have it. You can assume that these are adults. You can high school students sort of, whiling away their free time in their senior year in the library or something like that. So the breakdown is about 28% of the learners are from the United States. And then the second is by far India. In the GIS courses, it's almost 20% of learners are from India. There is some challenges sometimes with the cost of the courses. We've had a learner from Nepal who, he didn't have a credit card. And so we found a way for him to effectively, edX gave him 100% discount on the course, accessing, being able to access that. So a lot of our courses, the captions are not simply an accessibility convenience for English language speakers. It's actually a support for a lot of non-native speakers of English. Sure, you know, the courses are in English, but the videos are supported in that way. And some of our courses, the climate change course, we actually have captioned, the videos are captioned, the captions are translated into 5 different languages. So I'm not going to read all of these, but these are accurate, condensed, anonymized personas of people who have taken these courses. And this is after the fact. I didn't decide that. I didn't anticipate a lot of folks from South Africa who were forestry managers were going to want a far remote wildfire course that was highly Alaska specific. But because that course dealt with, the first, of course, used QGIS, which is an open source tool, and then the second one used ArcGIS Pro. So we kind of anticipate, you have to anticipate things you can't anticipate. Like how I can't assume that all my students are coming to me from some community in Alaska. So this is a course, I don't think Rick is still here, but Rick and John Walsh built this course about 1.5 years ago. It is an attempt to communicate these concepts of climate change specific to the Arctic to a global audience. If you go on edX.org or even if you just search online climate change, there's a lot of them out there. But none of them, and there's even some that are focused on the Arctic, but those are all from like University of Edmonton, Penn State, right? And we want to communicate to people that we are actually here. We're, you know, we have this leadership in that field based on our location, and we not only want to educate, but also let people know what interesting things are going on. And one of the things that this course does really well, and this is the one we're going to jump into at the end. I want to go through a few more things. Tom Marsick showed that the calculator for the heat pumps. It's super useful, but you can't, it's hard to just look at that and then know how to use it, right? And it's also, as great as it is, it's just a website. What they did is they took a lot of these clever climate change tools that have been built and used them. The course effectively teaches people how to use these tools in effective ways that are meaningful to their localities without, we didn't have to build them for the purposes of this course. We used the course as a vehicle to elevate, get a bigger audience for these, and also let people know this is how you would use this tool to some effect for your situation. And these are just 3 courses I'm highlighting. We have 28, but these are the ones that really focus on some kind of local issue that's specific to Alaska in some regard. And we've tried to make it germane and interesting to someone who has never set foot in Alaska, might not ever set foot in Alaska, and certainly isn't going to hitchhike out to UAF and enroll as an undergraduate. This course, How Many People Place, it does a really effective job of investigating the tensions between stakeholders within fisheries management. And that's all I'm going to say because I'm not the expert in that. But the course tries to create effectively empathy in the learners to understand how those relationships and those roles are needed to be managed, and how that comes to play in both Western and a Western approach to fisheries management and Indigenous approaches. This one is a very good example of not just a local issue, but research that's been translated into a course, which is not easy to do. Michelle Wilbur is in the room and was involved as one of many subject matter experts in this. Was led by Aaron Whitney. They basically took COVID travel funds that they couldn't use and used them to build this course. You know, it's kind of taking an online course is kind of a form of travel in a way. And this is a very the concepts in this course can be translated to many other instances, but it's really focused on Alaskan situations. And if you, like all these courses are open and free, you can check them out. This course has some really amazingly like, it'll make you think and really think hard about like applications of, I'm thinking of the question about the, how much wood does it take to heat a little mini cabin in the woods. It's a lot of fun thought experiences in this course, and it's a really well designed course. So, the next slide. Can you go back? Let's go. Let's jump. Tav is going to be a student for us for about 3 minutes. There's. Oh yeah. So we're going to do. Elle and I are going to do a presentation tomorrow morning, really for faculty about how Canvas works, how someone can build a course on Canvas. edX and Canvas are similar in this sequential approach to presenting material. I talked with Mike DeLu about, well, I'm going to show part of your course. What's the best part? And he's like, oh, it's definitely the week on physical properties of the ocean. So this course, Rick Toman and John Walsh were the principal instructors. They kind of guided it, they planned it out, but then they organized about 40 plus different content experts, most of them research faculty at IARC, at the International Arctic Research Center. And they each of them contributed a video on some specific aspect of Arctic climate change. You scroll down a little bit. So this is a quick play, just want to show how long the video is. You can see this is a 5.5-minute long video. This is one of 40 videos we had to make. And it probably took 20 hours of production and editing to make this one. But it's 5 minutes long. And it communicates a really complex concept within the context of the course in a way that it minimizes follow-on questions, right? It does so much by design that the course can exist for learners in a self-paced delivery mode without a lot of, Rick and John are not in this course every day, like responding to learners. The course has been designed to be effectively seamless. People are there working with them and responding to discussion forums and things like that. But it's really hands-off once the design's been completed. Tab, just kind of give us like 10 seconds on each slide. So there's reading. Well, out of those graphs that Rick was showing this morning, I'm like, ooh, we need to get those new graphs. So a lot of good graphs. We scroll down. And references, and put down a little bit here. You click on full text description. So if someone has a visual impairment, the words and data contained in that graphic are not accessible. So this is effectively a written description of this to the extent that that can be done for that specific audience. And every single graphic in the course is that. If that sounds time consuming, yeah, it is. Thanks, Steph. You can jump back to the course. So within this learning sequence, this is a great video. He's really cool. He's from Norway. He talks about surfing and stuff. And really gave us his time for free. Can you go to the top tab? Can go to the quiz. That's just the next one. So it's basically like video, text, video, quiz, video, like it's a very learning sequence. You're not asking someone to watch an hour of video and now do a discussion board. That's the week, right? So it's really broken up into these little bite-sized chunks where if you walked away from this, you wouldn't have to come back later and figure out, oh, where was I? You pretty much know you're not ever going to lose more than 5 or 10 minutes. The course sort of keeps a bookmark for you. And these questions here are ungraded, which means they're accessible to the folks who are in the free track. And in the interest of time, Tab, can you click all the way to that one and then next? You know what? I didn't make you a verified partner. So it skipped it, but there's a section there that'll only show up for folks who have paid. They don't even get the opportunity to try the graded assessment. And there's one reason for that is the 2 assessors in this course are actually graded by a human. There's an instructor who spends time evaluating it and responding to it. Let's jump back to the slides really quick, and I'll be done. So I want to end on a imagination note. I don't know what everyone in here is like, if this seems relevant to you. But I wanted to touch on next slide, please. What can the course do, right? It can serve a different purpose for different course teams, right? The GIS courses are serving an audience of people who want to gain a skill. Other courses are serving the outreach requirements of a branch. And that's great. And there's some learners who have found use in that course that have also satisfied another need institutionally. One thing that I would love to see a course do is develop, and I know there's lots of the citizen science and community-based science, but to do that globally would be fascinating. To cast a wide web of people across the globe to build a data set, to build something that is crowdsourced to a certain extent. Introducing new students to your field. You can also use these courses in a credit-bearing course. We can get free codes for our UAF students to give them access to something. So they're not just getting 3 credits in their sport business class, they're also getting a separate credential that adds to their resume. And the registrar's office at UAF is actually going to put that on people's transcripts. I still can't believe it. They're going to, it's a non-credit bearing item, but it's going to exist on the transcript. You can also just do something to build a team. If you have a team of people and you want to take on a challenge, it can be a really fun thing to build an edX course, even though it's a big deal. And then there's a couple of, I know people have approached me and said, hey, I want to do an edX course as the outreach component for a grant that I haven't written yet. How much does it cost? So there's these things out there that maybe a year or 2 down the road, they'll come back to us and we'll say, okay, wow, this is now going to be a course because it was something that was planned. So, and the last slide, this just tells you where to go. If you Google, Alaska free climate course, there's a good chance, depending on the phrasing, these things will come up. If you go to edX.org, ignore that and just type in Arctic, there's nothing else, just us. Thank you. Okay.
Good question.
Do you have a lineup for what edX you guys are throwing out there?
Yeah, we're working on a UPIC language and culture course and an Nuyakuk language and culture course right now. In fact, we had a videographer in class view this week to work on the Nuyakuk course. Those are pending late summer, fall. Those are courses that we have to get exactly right, because the audience might have almost no knowledge of that. There's a really good course on edX. It's open now. It's on Noongar language and culture. It's an Indigenous language in Western Australia. They have about 16,000 learners in that course, and they've done it absolutely right. It's a beautiful course. I would definitely encourage you to check it out. We have used that as kind of not a model, but inspiration for what we're doing. We're also working on 2 courses. Mike Willis is working on it, on unmanned aerial systems. And those are really a priority. We want to get those off the ground this summer. That's the big one. One on personal preparedness that has a zombie apocalypse theme in the course. So yeah, it's a lot of work, but we also get to kind of have fun and craft it for and craft these courses. So those should be coming online hopefully in 2023.
I'm looking on the website. It looks like a lot of the deadlines or all of the classes start today.
Just for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have to get into that, but edX will create a personalized learning schedule for each person based on when you enrolled, and it'll remind you. It's like, hey, remember when you enrolled in that course? Time to get back in and start learning. They give you little little rewards for like congratulations, you completed your first module, and that's just the platform. We build the content, the platform manages that. But yeah, some people ask, it's like, do I have to enroll today? Like, come back tomorrow and the date.
Like, as you're imagining, what is the smallest kind of course you could make? Like, if it would be a semester long 1 credit or 3 credit course or whatever, is that kind of what you're thinking, or could you do pretty small modules?
Yeah, I mean, there's courses on edX that are like, 2 weeks long. And it's like 1 to 2 hours, 2 hours of work a week. They're just little mini.
Okay.
Any question behind you?
Yeah, I was just wondering, on average, how many classes do you usually have to take to get a certificate?
Good question. So that we have 8 programs and we're either 2 or 3 courses. The idea is that like what edX wants to communicate to the learners, because it's product, people are buying it, is like in 3 months you can get some kind of professional certificate that we have 3 on social work right now, and people seem to find those valuable. Those are each have 2 courses, but they're 5-week long courses, so they're 10 weeks long. Each certificate is 10 weeks long. Yeah, we won't ever do anything longer than. Thank you. Should end it. Yeah, thank you.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay, here we go. Hello, Will Chaney, born and raised Dillingham, presently general manager of the cooperative. Before I get started, can I ask how many are familiar with the Nuyakuk Hydro project, please? Seen the presentation? Okay, that's what I was wondering. So I believe this is about the 5th time I've given this presentation this month, this last month. But we're happy for it. That's the goal. We're trying to get this out and make everybody aware of it. So next slide, Doug. Thanks. Who we are and what we're up to, I guess. Nuyakuk Cooperative. The first one is our mission statement, and I've been at the cooperative 22 years. The first 20, I knew it existed, didn't pay a lot of attention to it. These last couple, as I've moved into management, this last sentence really hit home for me. We will continually evaluate the needs of our members and take an active role in development of opportunities advantageous to our members. Something I like to say, diesel's been good to us. We've proven that we can operate with it, we can afford it. We're familiar with it. Things are changing. There's a lot of new technologies out that are becoming more and more advantageous and more realistic. So that sentence really hit home for me. The cooperative, we became a cooperative in the early 60s. Before that, we were a PUD, public utility district. And curiously enough, it's the PUD we have to thank for the electric gig tie line. And that was in an effort to reach a hydro prospect in Lake Elba. That the PUD was after developing a Lake Elba hydro concept, and the PUD dissolved and we turned into a member-owned cooperative. Lake Elba did not pan out, obviously. So this statement here, through substantial upgrades, we've been able to provide for the salmon processing load, as well as our residential loads out of our diesel power plant. That could change with load growth. Our last upgrade down here to the power plant involved 2 large diesel generators and a substantial switchgear upgrade. It says 14 million. I think it was closer to $17 million to make that upgrade. That's something we realize is if this were to come along again and who knows, but if we do have to make an upgrade in the future, what's it gonna be? Is it gonna be more diesel or is it gonna be a renewable? And that's a reality we could face. Concerning the Nuyakuk hydro, our focus right now is to study the resource and determine whether or not it's viable here in Dillingham. One of the overarching realizations is every hydro project is unique in its own way for the site, for the technology. We need to look at Nuyakuk and determine if it's fit for Bristol Bay, Dillingham, Nuyakuk, and our region. Genuinely interested in exploring alternative energy sources that take us away from diesel. We've looked into wind with the state with REAP years back, and things are changing, but at the time that we did the initial research, it wasn't looking great for us in our area. We've also looked back into Lake Elba along with a Grant Lake hydro project, and unfortunately, they're too small, too deep in the park, too expensive for what we would get out of them. Next one. So here's a drawing. The transmission corridors depicted are lines to connect dots. This isn't a plan for what it would look like. This is a depiction of what it could look like. You can see here we've got Klegnix, Nuyakuk, Leiblock, and Ekwok connected with Electric and Dillingham. We have existing tie lines in this all distribution, but tie lines between Dillingham and Electric and Ekwok and Nuyakuk. So those ones are existing. The hydro site up here at the falls, we're about 60 miles from Electric to the falls site. So that's 60 miles of transmission. That would be the first transmission on our system if it were to ever happen. You can see we artfully avoid the Woodtick State Park boundary there. That's probably going to remain in one way or another to be the case. We show the drainage, the Tikchik Lake drainage. It comes in at about just over 1,500 square miles that are all funneled through the Nuyakuk Falls. One of the interesting features here, we've got the Tikchik Lake system to the north of the Wood River Lake system, and they're almost mirror images of each other. The Wood River Lake system drains through, of course, the Wood River here, but that drains these 6 lakes. The Tikchik Lake system drains through the Nuyakuk Falls. And Dr. Schindler has some really interesting information on the temperature differences between the 2 lakes and what we expect the Tikchik Lake system to do as far as salmon. Okay, next one. Here's a picture. Up Riverside here, down Riverside here. This is the entirety of what is known as the Nuyakuk Falls. There's a portage trail here, traditional portage trail that's as old as anybody is aware, as far as I know. You'll pull your skiff up here, pull it up through the trees, dump it back in above the falls to access the lake system. This picture was taken in the fall, and I believe we were just over 5,000 CFS in this picture. The site varies from yesterday, I believe it was about 1,300 CFS to a high in June and July of just over 20,000 CFS. So quite a variance there. Okay, next one. Like the transmission depiction, that's what this is. These are the parts that would make up a site. You got your intake up here, your tunnels to the tail race, depicts an airstrip that would be used for construction and operation of the site, and the transmission line leaving it. So this picture is flipped. This is the upriver side, and that is the downriver side. Intake at the top, tail race at the bottom. One of the things that has been talked about as recently as last year, they show a concrete groin in this picture. That's something the studies will determine if it's necessary. This project does not involve a dam. I have to say that I've been involved with it for 2 years and done a number of these. I think this is a third WASIC presentation I've given. The other, of course, were via Zoom, but still today, when we sit down to talk to somebody about the Nuyakuk hydro concept, the question is, what about the dam? And I have never seen in any design or had a conversation about a dam at this site. We realized that that is not in the cards. We're beyond that, and thankfully we didn't have to find out through personal experience. The Northwest taught us that. So this concrete groin, this is aged. One of the other conversations that have grown since then is possibly in constructing a site at or near the powerhouse, that native rock could be used to make a groin, and all that would do is check up the water to get into the intake. Okay, regulatory milestone since the abeyance lifted, and for those of you who don't know, during COVID, we went into an abeyance. That was going to be one of our first, the start of our study seasons. Of course, we couldn't get people into Dillingham effectively. There were people that couldn't get out of their home states effectively. So we went into an abeyance and had that year to slow down. Thankfully for me, that was as I was becoming involved. Had it not been for that abeyance, I don't know if I would have caught up to the extent that I have. Honestly, it's been fast and furious, but we were able to revise the PSP and file it. We put together an aquatics resource working group, and that's a panel of stakeholders. We've got NOAA on there, NIMS on there, ADF&G, BBS, our Bristol Bay Science and Research Institute, and UTBB's got a seat on that group of people that get together and look at what we're doing. Really good conversations there. We did through the ARWG, we came up with a revised study plan and filed it with FERC. FERC issued a study plan determination. I think we submitted 18 studies. Of the 18 submitted, 14 were approved, 2 were approved with modifications, and 2 were deemed unnecessary. So pretty good message back, I believe, from FERC, but never done. Consistent collaboration with the ARWG, like I say, that's where the revised study plan came from, and that's what we realized we need to do for where we're at. Just like this one, NETC, well, we didn't organize this one, but we have organized a number. Just last year, one of the board members and I made a trip to Klignik and Klignik and Nuyakuk to put on an update presentation. And since the start back in 17, there have been a number of stakeholder meetings given. Over the past year, so this is, we're out of the abeyance and starting to move. We're looking at official study seasons in 23 and 24 to get the information to have the conversations. Collaborative ARWG and public involvement related to technical study plan improvements. Geotech analysis. Last summer, we did a preliminary study season. We got 4 holes bored at or near the site to assess some rock quality. Site-specific methods testing. We had a group of biologists up there deployed sonar tags and did some fish counting work. All the natural resource study leads are in place. McMillan Jacobs is putting together the leads for this summer studies. Biological study camp established. We have 1 cabin and 1 weather port on site. And we're looking at adding another weather port for more realistic, more room, more sheltered space, if you will. Requisite natural resource permit application submitted. We are getting ready for the 2 study seasons. Development life cycle economic models. We worked through the EPIT program, developed a pretty neat economic model. And cooperative agreements reached with BBSRI, BBNA, and ADF&G related to certain study elements. That was something I was really excited about being from here. That was one of the things I realized. The work we are looking, just to look at this site, that was, I ran across, literally, I can say, I ran across the street to talk to Tim Sands with ADF&G when I got involved in this. Tim, I'm part of the project. I'm really excited. ADF&G, you know, if we have fisheries work, I feel our Dillingham Department of ADF&G should be involved. And he said, well, that's great, but we don't have the money. So you know, look for plan B here. And this is that. Through collaboration, we're working with BBSRI. Our first study plan included a fish counting tower. The site is split up into 3 zones. They were gonna put a fish counting, our fish counting effort was gonna take place in zone 3 at the bottom of the falls. Something that BBSRI, Brian Nast, to his credit, realized was if we can take the fish counting effort and move it to the historical ADF&G counting site, we can use that information as a continuation of the work that ADF&G did up until the early 2000s, I think was the last time they were in there, but it makes that data cumulative. We're building on what they had done as opposed to establishing our site at the falls and having data that only applies to ours. So we are looking at reestablishing the counting tower at the traditional ADF&G site. It's about 17 miles downriver, but it will suffice for the information we need for fish passage, and then it's cumulative with ADF&G stuff. Likewise, BBNA and ADF&G, they both do subsistence surveys already. That's another requirement to our study plan. So we can work with BBNA and ADF&G in a continuation of their work and get the information we need. Multiple ARWG and public meetings, along with presentations at relevant regional conferences. And this is great. It's really impressive to have these groups here. We did swim earlier this week and now this conference. It is fantastic to have this group here to be able to give this presentation, because traditionally we travel and we deliver this in Anchorage or Juneau or somewhere else. So it's neat to have that flip where everybody's here. Study program intent, document baseline conditions. That was one of the conversations, back to my conversation with Tim Sands, when my excitement was in the look we were going to get at the falls proper. And Tim's realization was a couple things here, Will. One, we don't have any baselines for that site because it works, and we're not going to spend money on a system that works. It's like, God, well, that's so that's where I see an opportunity. We're going to come away with this with a better understanding of what happens at the falls specific, and that information should feed into our fishery for generations to come. Gain a better understanding of aquatic species abundance and composition near the project area. Again, site specific, and as they say, each hydro installation is very unique. So we're going to have better information about our site. Utilize aquatic modeling techniques to assess fish passage and behavior over a variety of flow and operational scenarios. That's one of the things I mentioned earlier. Not a dam, it's a diversion project. Have intake at the top and tail race at the bottom. But we need to know, in diverting that water, we're taking it out of that falls reach. It's about 2,000 feet of rapids. It's not falls, it's rapids. But in diverting that water, what happens in that reach? How do we change the habitat? These are some of the things we're looking at. Determine potential impacts to migratory wildlife, vegetation, wetlands as a result of transmission development. That 60-mile transmission line across the country right now that's never seen, some of us never seen people, foot traffic. If this project were to go, that transmission line is a necessity. We've got to get it from up there to here. Assess potential impacts, positive and negative, from project development and operations. That's an interesting statement because I mentioned earlier, it varies from 1,000 CFS to just over 20,000 CFS. I was lucky enough to visit the site in 2021. I think it was July 12th. And that falls reach was chuck and block full of salmon. And it is the one place, and I've seen a number of them, but it is the one place I have ever seen sockeye salmon that would not bust from the shoreline when they saw you. There were sockeye slammed in tight to the shore that could give a rip. I've got video actually of underwater video of them. They would not break from the shore due to large part of the flow in the falls. So the water velocity had them fairly tuckered. And until they got enough rest, they were going to hold tight. And I joke about, I could have caught them with my mouth. I don't understand why there weren't bears there, but there weren't. It was that close. So a positive impact could be if we divert 30% of 20,000 CFS, does that make it easier for a sockeye to transition falls? I'm not saying that's a benefit, but it's a possible, it's certainly an impact. Ultimately, And this one's the important one, make determinations on the feasibility of the project development based on quality site-specific science. We need to determine if this project is of enough benefit for the area to move forward. So, okay. Natural resource study program. So these are bullets on the FERC study program. Fisheries, water resources. I think I mentioned, entrainment and impingement. What does it do to the habitat in the falls when we divert some water? And at what stage do we need to quit diverting? These studies are basically going to be a roadmap for the development of the site if it were to be developed. That's something we realize. A lot of the FERC requirements. So a lot of these track with traditional hydro from what I believe and understand. Dissolved oxygen, water temperature focus, that's something they look into in developing hydro flow duration curve, stationarity assessment. Future flow study, I think it was mentioned earlier. I wish I could have been here all day because just in 2 presentations I heard there were mentions of things that I find very interesting. But ice process assessment, we've got some pictures of the site from late last week. And guess what? There's some ice up there. Flow is really low and there's literally a rivulet. If you remember the picture of the site, there's literally a rivulet of water running up the middle right now and everything else is icebound. Okay. Terrestrial, cultural, rec and aesthetics, rec and viz. Again, FERC studies that would take place within the next 2 years, looking at the feasibility of the site. Next steps, coordination and logistics throughout ongoing. We are in meetings. We're planning a LiDAR flyover as soon as the ice lets that happen. We're getting ready to move some more camp materials into the site and build that last tent platform. Complete biological study camp setup. I mentioned onboard camp managers. That's one thing. Last year, I made the trip. I made 3 trips in to finish out the cabin, finish out the tent. These 2 official study seasons, we are going to have full-time camp managers on site to move folks in and out, keep the camp running and keep things safe. Formalize all requisite permits. That's in the works course, and that's something we realize is going to be going on for the next 2 years. I mentioned LiDAR and habitat mapping. We actually had a date for tomorrow. We were going to do our LiDAR flyover until last week, and we got the pictures back, and we realized it wouldn't do us any good. So we pushed that back. Commenced study program made early June. Again, weather access permitting, and then a good one here, data analysis reporting. FERC's initial reporting requirement was August. They wanted all the data that had been procured during the previous year to be pulled back in August. We're not starting until about then, so we realized that that wasn't going to work for us. We've successfully got in touch with FERC and had that pushed back to December. So 23 and 24, we are able to work through our traditional work season, work window, and then process the data and deliver the information to FERC by December. Okay. So in 20, this would be looking ahead to 2024. Say we've got through the 2023 study season and we're on to 2024. We're into the second study season, looking at all the resource areas, possibly further geotechnical analysis. By then, we need to assess rock quality across the site, refine conceptual design based on study results. So now, if we were to get to this point, now we're looking at what that picture is going to look like based on what we know from the studies, and only then. Again, data analysis and reporting, that's going to go to FERC as well as our ARWG and our membership. Collaborative decisions related to project feasibility begin. So say we're into the second study season and things are, we've got, now we're at the point where we've got enough information to start to have the conversation. whether or not this is right for us. And then ongoing consultation meetings and project updates throughout. That's something we've tried to do. We've got an email list and a website. I neglected to put the website. It's nuyakuk.hydro.com, believe it or not. And you can get on a mailing. You're right. And you can get it on the email list for any updates that we put up, whatever they may be. It's a fairly large email list. Okay. Overall conceptual schedule, conceptual being the key term here. Mentioned the comprehensive study seasons 23 and 4, reporting in 23 and 4. That's that December time frame. After the study reporting is completed, we now start to share this information out with the public and with the region. Ongoing infrastructural and site analysis and design. It's the studies that are going to lean into that. That's we're not, Mother Nature is the only one that does it perfectly. So further geotech analysis, I talked about that. The PLP. So now we're getting, very conceptual. If everything looks good and we've had the meetings and everybody feels that it is a possibility, we move into the preliminary licensing proposal. That'll be submitted to FERC. There will be a comment period, federal comment period there, and then and only then can we move to the final license application. Okay. And I think this is about finishes it out. The cooperative intent. Genuine desire to be transparent, inclusive, proactive with feasibility evaluation. Again, I can't stress enough, that's what we're doing. We're assessing the feasibility. Nothing we've done is designed to come to a plan for the site. That'll be spoken to by the studies. Make decisions on that feasibility with potential impacts to the natural environment at the forefront. We're a fishing region, right? That's our intent is not to, or what we understand is we cannot trade one resource for another. If it has an impact that's detrimental to the fishery, we don't think we're going to get permission. We're not going to get social licensing to pursue it, and that's important. That's who we are, where we're at, and we understand that. And the big thing here, what we're after. Establish a more reliable power grid that minimizes, eliminates the need for fossil fuel generation, provides the potential for growth in the public and commercial areas. I spoke to that a little bit, and I think you guys have touched on it today. And again, I wish I could attend all day, but that's a huge statement for who we are, where we're at compared to those 20 years ago. I remember in my 22 years of cooperative, I can remember when diesel was 99 cents a gallon for us. It has more than tripled in those 20 years, and my crystal ball isn't good enough to tell me what it's going to do tomorrow. So it's a concern, and I can go all the way back to that second sentence in our mission statement. It is a responsibility of ours to try to identify what is going to be a stable source of energy for us in our region, and this is one of them. One of the looks we've got. Long-term and cost-effective energy platform for the region. That grid, that's one of the things the state realizes is that grids are cheaper than multiple small power plants and fuel storage sites. If we can come out of this with a transmission line that connects our region, I think we're headed in the right direction. Nuyakuk has right now today. And it's product of the state's numbers, the most efficient diesel power plant in region. That transmission line works both ways, from the hydro down, but also from our diesel plant out. So if we connect the villages that were on that map and something were to happen to the hydro site, we needed to do maintenance, whatever the case may be, we then fire up the most efficient diesel power plant in the region to produce power and generate to those other communities from our powerhouse. The powerhouse would have to remain in place. You need 100% redundancy, and that's what our diesels would be. Potentially provided the supplemental but significant benefit of fiber optic upgrade to outlying communities. Another project the cooperative is working on right now is to extend the fiber optic cable presently ends in lead block. GCI's cable stops in lead block and it goes to microwave. Their Terra project microwaves the internet and broadband all the way up to the Yukon, if I'm not mistaken. But we're looking at extending the fiber into Dillingham from lead block. And this would also, if the transmission line were to come to pass, we can hang fiber optic cable on that and connect those same villages that way. And I believe that is it.
Who stands to benefit besides all the people here with energy as far as kilowatt sales, and who would be the owner of the utility there, the hydro?
As it stands, the cooperative would be the owner and operator of.
Michigan?
Yeah. Right, and thank you, Bella. That's another thing I neglected to mention. Born and raised here, 22 years of cooperative. I personally would rather see our member-owned cooperative looking into this development than anyone else from elsewhere. I think, yeah, because that's my understanding. It is our membership who is going to have the final say, and that's important. You know, that there's no one who understands the importance of our fish better than we do, and that's.
Sorry if I missed it. Given your low winter flows around LPTFS, what percent of the current output of the diesel that?
It's by the preliminary numbers. There's a stream gauge the USGS installed in the late 50s, I believe, at the outlet of Tikchik Lake. And based on the data from that late 50s install to present day, they assume a 10 to 12 meg resource at the falls. Present last year, I think we were close to 7 megs under production load. Now, and another important aspect, right now, we presently only have access to 30% of the flow. 70% of the flow has to remain in river, and that's for to protect fisheries. Now, this is a number that was picked for that reason. We want to make sure and protect the habitat, and that's great. The studies may modify that number, may not. But at 30% of the flow, we're looking at 10 to 12 megs. Right now, we'd be burning diesel more than likely. At 1,000, 1,300 CFS, we're going to be supplementing. But under production in the summer, we could process salmon, and you're probably aware we don't make cans anymore. Everything we do is fresh frozen, and that had a dramatic impact. That's a big part of the reason we made the $17 million investment in our power plant, was to upgrade our capacity and refresh our switchgear. But a lot of the driver there was to provide for the processing plants that show up in the summer. It's a huge swing. We're probably at about 2 megs right now, and if it was really quiet, you can just hear the diesels out the door. But at 2 megs, we'd be burning diesel. But throughout the summer, when they're going gangbusters, we could have a quiet power plant. We've got a neighboring community, Iliamna and New Haven, non-Dalton. They have a hydro project right now that's 100% effective. They can shut their diesel down. George Farnberger absolutely loves it. It's a good question, and again, it does speak to or incorporates that redundancy. Regardless of what happens, we have to have the ability to produce and deliver the power, and that means those diesels don't go anywhere.
Now, on state land, does that mean that they get a portion of the kilowatt sales or a certain percentage?
Oh boy, I hope not. Not that I'm aware of. No, within the state park, that was one of the things in the state park charter when that was written, possible hydro development. One of the backstories I'd heard, the feds were looking at making it a national park until the state realized that was coming. So the state jumped on it to make it a state park for that reason, so we could retain some control. If it were federal land, I wouldn't be here.
Do they cross any and or other state federal land?
State land and, I think we're pretty much state land and some Chugung land. Once we, and this, so that's from the falls to Electric. As we get closer to the communities, there might be, and that's something that would be assessed in the studies and as it were being developed.
How many miles of lines would there be and how much does that cost?
The cost is immense. The projected cost of the project completely is speculated between 140 and 160 million dollars. Total, I believe it was near 120 miles of transmission. It's about 60 to the site from Dillingham, and then to get out to the Nuyakuk and over to Lee Block, you had a considerable amount. To put some sideboards on that, our cooperative alone, we consume about 1.2 to 1.3 million gallons annually, and that's every year. That's and more load equals more fuel. The two cats we added increase our fuel consumption, of course. So, and it, if I said it earlier, it's been good to us. And diesels, we're familiar with it. It's that old trend, but things are changing, and there are other possibilities out there that we think might bring good things to us.
Maybe some federal money to help pay for it.
Oh, absolutely. That's yes.
Yeah.
That's on menu. Mark?
The other thing you mentioned that I hadn't really thought about is that if something does happen with the hydro, fire up the diesel here and feed those upriver villages, that would save the transportation of all that diesel up there to their plants, which we've seen in years of drought, that it had to be flown up there and they were paying $12 a gallon or whatever.
That's one of the costs that the state is very familiar with, is supporting the smaller power plants and fuel storage sites. It's enormous at best, and when there are emergencies, whether it be earthquake, fire, spill, whatever the case, it's very expensive to support those remote site fuel containment areas for spills, flying in new generators in the middle of winter to bring
Disaster relief, yeah.
Yeah.
There, with the size of the project and the load as is there room for some electrification, like more electric vehicles or heat pumps and houses and things like that in certain seasons to be taken up?
Yep, and one thing I neglected to mention too is with that transmission line, like I say, I believe it's about 120 miles in total, 60 to the site. We passed two mountains, I won't call them mountain ranges, Teamuck Mountain and the McClung Hills there. We've looked at wind in our area. One thing we realize is that as you go south from here, you have beach mud. It's hard to anchor a 1 meg turbine in beach mud. It's expensive. The expense literally starts at trying to build the road to get the equipment to the site to stand up a turbine of that size, and then you need to anchor it. Very expensive, very costly, but with that transmission line headed north, you get into more rock. So that and the base load provided by the diesel, by the hydro up there, would be more advantageous for bringing other supplemental renewables online. We could add wind and not have to rely on it being a base load. We could add solar. I know Wildfire just more than doubled their solar installation. They had 500 kW. I think they're up to 1100 now. And that's one of those statements for us out here in rural Alaska that, hey, that probably works. You can get all the engineers you want to sit in front of you and try to sell you something, but when you have neighbors that are doing it and are adding to it, that's a statement worth listening to for sure. Am I getting pushed off?
Okay. We threw that clock away.
Any more? Thank you.
All right, I know we're running a little bit behind, so I'll go as quick as possible. My name is Shelby Bacus. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm a graduate student at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and I work on and live on Kodiak Island. And I work in collaboration with NOAA Fisheries, studying the effects of juvenile snow crab and panda crab. Before I begin, I just want to say it's such an honor to be here, be able to present on Yupik land, and I conduct my research and my work and live on the Yupik land. I also just want to say that knowledge systems, or the way we think, the way we conduct research, significantly varies between groups of people. So my research and my presentation today is extremely limited to a Western way of thinking, and what that means is that the information you take away from this presentation just doesn't account for all knowledge. All right. Just for my own curiosity, raise your hand if you've seen snow crab or panda crab in the news in like the past week. Great. Okay, so it's not just me. I've seen a lot of headlines as a crab scientist like this, trying to find answers to the mysterious Bering Sea crab collapse, or a little bit more dramatic, billions gone, what's behind the disappearance of Alaska snow crabs? Simply put, where have all the snow crabs gone, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can hold there. And the number one question I get when people find out that I say snow crab and panda crab, especially within the past 6 months, is where did all the crab go? Now, if you haven't heard about crab in the past 6 months in the news, a little bit of backstory. There was a massive snow crab die-off event in the Bering Sea in 2021. Now, NOAA Fisheries has been doing surveys in the Bering Sea since 1975 and has never seen anything quite like what we saw in 2021. So this led to the Bering Sea snow crab fishery being closed for the first time in its existence this past October, hence all the headlines. This is a complete collapse of a multi-million-dollar fishery. Panda crab, on the other hand, the fishery did open this year, but it's not without its own socioeconomic challenges. Just for example, in my region, we had the Kodiak Tana crab fisherman strike that delayed the start of the season by almost a month. So the multi-million-dollar question then is, what's happening to all the crabs? And there are plenty of potential causes for population decline in crab populations, and they can range from overfishing to disease like bitter crab syndrome, to pollution, to migration, and honestly, it's probably a combination of all of it. But time and time again, we see the science and the data and the evidence pointing towards climate change as being one of those major causes of our population decline in our crab species. And even more so, increasing ocean temperatures seem to be one of the most pervasive issues facing crab populations. And in particular, there are scientists out there trying to make links and are making links between the 2019 persistent marine heat wave in the North Pacific to the massive die-off event we saw in 2021. But increasing temperatures are not the only climate change related variable that are affecting our oceans. There are obviously many. Another big one is ocean acidification. So for the past 100 years or so, we've seen a steady increase in atmospheric CO2. And this is largely driven by anthropogenic forces like the burning of fossil fuels or deforestation. So this leads to the oceans uptaking more CO2, and that leads to, in green, a decrease in oceanic pH, aka what we call ocean acidification. And unfortunately for polar and subpolar regions, the solubility of CO2 gas, so how much CO2 liquids can uptake like our oceans, increases in cooler climates, making Alaska particularly prone to the effects of OA. So this might sound obvious, but I like to say it out loud anyways. Our oceans are warming and acidifying concurrently at the same time, not separately from each other at different rates, at different degrees, but at the same time. The multiple stressor experimentation really aims to characterize both the individual effects of stressors on marine organisms, but more importantly, the interactive effects. And this is important because it can provide more ecologically relevant predictions for how our marine species are going to fare in the future. Also, interactive effects are often different than the individual effects. Sometimes we see a larger effect, sometimes we see a smaller effect, sometimes we see no effect compared to the individual. So they're really important to characterize. So my study aimed to determine both the individual and interactive effects of OA and OW on the growth, development, physiology of juvenile tanner snow crab. The way I did this was by designing an experiment for both species that consisted of 4 different treatments that the treatments pretty much are built to mimic different climate scenarios. So we have an ambient treatment that are our current present day ocean conditions. Then we have one that just looks at ocean acidification or decreasing pH. We have one that looks at ocean warming, so increasing temperatures, and one that are our future predicted ocean conditions, looking at both OA and OW. So you can see the setup in a series of photos. The top photo being all 4 treatment tanks at our NOAA Kodiak laboratory. And then you can see a little bird's eye view of inside those treatments. We have 30 individual juvenile tanner crab being kept and raised for 360 days. What's great about this and them being housed individually is we can track their growth, their development, and their physiology finally to the crab over the course of 360 days. So over the course of the experiment, we take a lot of measurements at a lot of different time points so we can get a lot of data. So we can look at growth and development by looking at morphometrics. So in the photo, for example, measuring carapace width, carapace length, taking those measurements, taking mass measurements throughout their molt cycles. At the very end of the experiment, we can just look at survivorship simply as a metric. We can look at physiological parameters like metabolism, dermal tolerance, and even stress markers in tanner crab and juvenile crab like cortisol, AG70. And lastly, we can even look at carapace composition, which tells us what elements and what minerals these juvenile crab are uptaking into their carapace for growth in different environmental conditions. So I have some preliminary results to share with you guys. I'm going to share some preliminary results from our juvenile tanner crab experiment. This experiment has been going on since this past August and will end this upcoming August. I'm not going to share any figures or data with you about the juvenile snow crab experiment quite yet. It's a newer experiment, started in December, and we're still working through that data. But if you guys are lucky, I might give you a little teaser. So we can start with some growth analysis data from our juvenile tanner crabs. And there's a lot going on in this figure. Don't worry, we'll walk through it together. On the y-axis, we just have massing grams. On the x-axis, we have the molt numbers, starting from the very beginning of the experiment and after every subsequent molt. We're really lucky. They've gone through 3 molt cycles already and are currently working on a 4th. So we have a lot of great data already. The individual dots that you see on the figure represent the masses of each individual crab from all the treatments. And the lines, the solid lines you see, are the linear regression models for the growth rate for each treatment. Now, again, these are preliminary results. More analyses are coming, so take that with a grain of salt. But what we see is that temperature and pH significantly affect the growth rate of juvenile tanner crab. For example, the highest growth rates, surprisingly, are coming from simply our OA or ocean acidification treatment, decreased pH. Surprising, not necessarily what I would expect. Our lowest growth rates are coming from our ocean warming treatment. And I think the most surprising thing is that our OA, so our future predicted ocean condition treatment and our current present day ocean condition treatment have statistically the same exact growth rate. Weird. But the biggest thing I want to find out, and I kind of hinted at it at the beginning of this presentation, is that the interactive effects of OA and OW are significantly different than individual effects. Next, we can move on to thermal tolerance. So we're going to look at data from thermal tolerance 90 days into our experiment. And again, this figure is looking at thermal tolerance, and we define thermal tolerance as our CT max metric. And that stands for critical thermal maxima. And that's just the temperature the maximum temperature that juvenile tanner crab can withstand before they die. So we have that on the y-axis, and on the x-axis we have our different treatments. And hopefully what you can see is that there's a big separation between our treatments. And what we're seeing is that there's a significant effect of temperature on the CT max of juvenile tanner crab. What that means is that higher acclimation temperatures, so those crabs are in the ocean warming treatment and the future predicted ocean treatments, are able to increase their CT max, showing a sign of thermal resiliency to future predicted ocean conditions, compared to those that are acclimated to lower temperatures. We didn't see any effect in pH, no, actually weren't any interactive effects in this measure. Now we can move on to metabolism. Metabolism is great. It's the amount of oxygen we use in our body and how we need it. It's a great metric for energy and bioenergetics. And we're going to look at 2 time points. Day 0, which is actually before the juvenile crab were introduced to their treatment. So they're just hanging out in a large holding tank with ambient seawater conditions. And then 90 days in, when they've been in their treatment for 90 days. On the y-axis, we have the mass-specific metabolic rate. What that means is that we've just standardized metabolism to size, because how big you are really messes with your metabolism. And what we see, again, I hope this is kind of obvious, that there's a significant effect of pH and temperature, both individually and interactively, on metabolic rate. So if we compare day 0 and day 90, the crab that are experiencing either decreased pH or increased temperature have significantly increased their metabolic rate. And what's cool is that we can look at our ambient, our control treatment in purple, and it's almost equivalent. Statistically, it is equivalent to what we see before the crab even go in their treatment, which is what you would expect. I'm going to tease the snow crab data. It's similar, so it's great. It's really interesting and really cool to see that between both species that are, by the way, part of the same genus, just different species, so they're congeneric, we're seeing similar results. Different metabolic rate, but OA and OW are increasing metabolism. But what does this all mean for the future and the future of our fisheries, our commercial fisheries especially? Well, our data tells us that it is energetically costly to maintain homeostasis under OA and OW conditions. And unfortunately, when we have to input more energy into maintaining base regulation or thermal regulation, our crab's bodies have to take that energy from other processes. And so a lot of times where the crabs can take that energy away from other important processes that might see potential consequences down the line. So if they're taking energy to maintain homeostasis away from stuff like growth, developmental timing, reproduction, fitness, we can see potential negative consequences in the future. And the crazy thing about this, size, timing to maturity, timing to harvestable size, and just the rate at which populations fluctuate are all like the metrics that determine if our fisheries stay open or stay closed, or if they open again. So it's all really relevant and important to fisheries management. Now, at the end of my experiments, my ultimate goal and what I've written grant money to do is to integrate my experimental results into the development of a dynamic bioclimate envelope model. That's a lot of words just to say that this model assesses fisheries catch potential not only under different climate scenarios, but also under different fishing pressures, the different fishing management strategies. And it's really interesting because there's a lot of models that, one, integrate experimental results that we do in the lab with environmental data that, again, NOAA Fisheries has since 1975 for the Bering Sea, in addition to fishing management strategies and different fishing pressures. So it can really be informative for how we manage the fisheries in the future. With that, I just want to say Thank you to my funding partners and to my advisor and committee members, lab mates, facilities, and especially ALASA and NSF score for getting me here to this conference and getting to listen to all of you guys speak. And if you have any questions, I think just in the presence of time, come find me at Willow Tree. Yeah, thank you guys so much.
I guess we could start real quick. Get into your dinner time. Been a long couple days. I just want to introduce BBNA Forestry, and I don't know if my boss is here. Tom Austin is, I operate under the Land Department, LMS, and Carl Cox, my fuels manager. I introduced BBNA's forestry program. I started in 2014, 9 years ago. We had a 64-page forestry fire management plan. I'll introduce that we have now a 243-page document. I'm not going to bore you with that. But what we've done in the last 9 years is develop and kind of like on our own, for the only program that is planning for what we're about to, I think, witness in the next 5 years or less. This is our forestry program. We have one other, Michaela Flenberg, Sonny, is our supervisor for field crew. And it's just me, Carla, and Sonny, basically. We have 8 forest laborers, which chainsaw operators. Next. So this is who we are. We have a service provider area from, it's all of Bristol Bay, from Good News Bay to Iliamna, down to Chignix. Perryville is the last village we service. Go ahead. So our service provider area is all those areas that I'm talking about. And it explains who and what we are. We have all the different climate. We have interior, lake region, and the coastal region on the peninsula. So we have sub-region. We deal with basically about, it's a sizable Ohio. And we have sub-regions. Togiak, Manicodic, as you know, as you go west, there's no trees almost. So they have cottonwood brush. Then we have Nuyakuk Bay sub-region, which is about 70% of the forest in Bristol Bay. Is between here and Electnagik. The other 30% is up on Iliamna, surrounding the lake. And those are real sparse. Most of it's behind Cockanock. Lake Iliamna. Then we have the Peninsula Quejack subregion. That's a whole different area. And we try to service almost all our compact villages since we collect money for those. Go ahead. So we have 1,700. Basically, I'll introduce our program as native allotment. We only service on federal trust lands. So those native allotments are real important for us to service them, but then they're surrounding inholders. We have village corporation land, regional corporation land, state land. We're all inholders and basically borderline all the other land use owners. Go ahead. So we provide assistance and guidance to regional tribal entity hazardous fuels management. Basically, I look at the trees as fuel. If you walk and run around Dillingham, if you drive around, about 5 years ago, we had a site visit from our regional forester, and he just was alarmed. I mean, if we had a fire just as close as a dump, it would spread through Dillingham faster than a wildfire would. So basically, when I first got the job, we not only had to deal with the native allotments, but then we have to do we're inholders of all other federal, state, regional, village corporation landowners. So we're developing regional plans on forest fire management. Go ahead. So in a response, we go through a whole list of federal NEPA environmental impact statement. There's nesting seasons. Go ahead. And these are all the different agencies we have to deal with. I'll stop. I'm just caught up with Will here. Go ahead. So my very first project about 5 years ago was to help the village of Cockanock. They have They have the highest density of beetle kill. And it's jumped from Kenai to the Lake Iliamna area. So their main concern was all the, they call it, the protection of the village. Here's their dump site. So about 5 years ago, we helped them put in a 50-foot fire break to stop anything that would be coming this way and from their dump. We actually put this road, if you look at this road, they paid, BIA roads paid for basically a brush along the south side of this road. And we paid for the brushing along this and then around the dump site. That 50-foot now is, we have 100-foot, that last year's forest fire and the fire break basically to help the village not only slow down if there's in case of a fire, but it gives them a chance of defensive strategy to slow it down or stop it. Go ahead. We also do like native allotment easements. That's one of the projects where we can put, so if a fire starts here, maybe if we put in a fire break there, that slow it down enough to someone to actually curb the spread of fire. Go ahead. Here's what our crew does. These guys are soldiers. They're out every day. In the last 2 years, I think we calculated we put over 10,000 miles. And then last year's really stormy season, we had a huge power outage. Took us 3 days to help catch up. The problem with, this, it's all manual labor. We're remote. We don't have access. So we have snowmobiles or it's by four-wheelers in the fall. These guys go out and every day, raining, sunshine, 30 below, we stop at 10 below, try to do close to work in town so they don't freeze or get frostbite. But so that's kind of what we do on a regular, but the other thing that we do is we do firewise projects and first come, first serve around homes. If you look around, I think Dean Clark's is most, not Dean, Paul Clark's. So I call it park-like. We go in and thin, take out, spatially take out trees. We limb the trees up to 8 feet or higher, and then we kind of clear out undergrowth brush. I call it park-like thinning. So, and by the time they get done, they can see the bears coming before they. In 2022, the reason I'm here, we had a real record fire season. In November, the reports came out. We finalized BBNA. I'm here to tell you what we don't do. We don't put out fires. We help try to prevent them. We got calls. There's a fire. In the next few slides, I'll explain why. Is that BBNA contracts for basically we contract field program to prevent fires like firewise, 30-foot radius around a home, 100-foot out. We basically thin. And that's the beginning of our each individual application. So what happened in 2022 is we had 18 reported fires in our logbook. We had over 650 square miles, almost 500,000 acres of park burnt earth right in our back door. And that's a list of them. I don't want to bore you with all the detail. Go ahead. So this is why I'm here. In 1 year, in 2022, we had more reported fires and more acreage burned in 52 years of history. And we've seen that coming about 5 years ago. The springs are getting drier, longer drought periods of months at a time. 19 was a prime example. And so we not only upped our services, right, asking each village like Kokonok. That was our first fire break village that we have. Levelock did their own right in the middle of a fire. Basically, Fort Hyden, the village itself did their own because they would send out equipment. If you read the news and watching those times, it's pretty scary when you see fires right behind the village, 10 feet from your house with a cat trying to keep your house from burning down. So this is why I'm here, is to tell you that that's an alarming statistic. It's only gonna get worse, they tell us, so go ahead. So there's the two biggest fires in 2022, the Cockatoolie, and then this is boy, I'm trying to figure out Lime Complex, but there's the Cockatoolie and the Cockawalk fire. Basically, in the last slide, I'll show you what that looks like. Is those two fires burn more? It's unbelievable what it looks like. If you flew over it, it's be interesting to see what the next few years is going to bring. So, go ahead. So that's one of the Cockatoolie fires. I'll let Carla.
I get to do the fun stuff. This is the Cockatoolie fire. It's actually my father-in-law's native allotment, and we were given the pictures by his grandson Zechariah King and his dad Rick, and the 6 smoker jumpers were up there to help maintain and take care of the fire, and were able to download and save these pictures, but they did save his native allotment. The cabins were saved, and it was amazing with how the fires jumped from one side of the river to the other side. And but you can go to the next photo. There's other pictures, and this one actually it's like a short video, so you can click on that and share. Taking care of the fire. It was a huge fire. But there's another picture of the after the fire. The next slide. Yeah. This is the area that was burnt. The cabins were saved. Yeah, it was the aftermath. And there was also the fires down below across the river that jumped over to that area, and they got the jumpers there just in time. So, yeah.
Oh, go ahead. So basically since 2014, in the last 8.5, 9 years, this is what we've done. We average about, it's between 5 and 11, last year was 11 homes around Dillingham. And then we try to thin out and do firewire projects. We completed the 100-foot fire break behind Cockanock. We're planning one in Stew, maybe one in Ekwalk, on a Nuyakuk. As they come in, and funding's kind of been a challenge, but with, I think, climate change, I think with all the forest fire in America, basically it's just everywhere. That we're we're lucky that at least we're the only agency addressing like forest fire management in Bristol Bay. So, go ahead. So pre-COVID, we bought a building, we put it up right in the middle of COVID. Luckily, we kept working. Second, it provided us opportunity to get up equipment, because without a place to house them and maintenance them, we weren't eligible. So now we're eligible. We're moving on with our projects. They're getting bigger. Go ahead. So the exciting thing is not a bad thing, but beetle kill is killing a lot of trees. We applied for a feasibility study, and it just now got completed this last month, the end of March here. We're eligible for a cordwood boiler. Next, we're developing wood chip processing capacity and expanding the deadfall, not just the trees, but the brush. So there's one thing I've noticed in the last 10 years. If you look at the moose population in west of us in Togiak subregion, the brush has gone like, if you look at, it's almost like a forest of alder and brush. That's going to be the next thing is, I think, cordwood is feasible if you have the supply. So the next thing is we're planning the whole region for alternative energy sources, which offset diesel prices and you understand. Go ahead. So we're scheduling, basically, we're forecasting another high forest fire threat. They anticipate a dry season like last year, and hopefully don't reach the record numbers that we had last year. We have designated to monitor. We basically tell you what we do is we report the fires. That's the incident command center in Anchorage, and there's a coordinated effort with that. We recommend, we actually assess the level of threat, and then they call us and ask the level of suppression to present. Go ahead. So first, this is what flyer we send out to all the villages, what to do in case of a fire. First contact, first of all, they didn't know what to put on. There used to be VHF, not 911 anymore. A lot of them, now we have cell phones. And then we updated the statewide reporting system. And then Tom Austin is basically, and his designee between me, Carla, Tom Austin, Sheila, Nikita will assess the level of threat. And then we recommend the level of suppression. We only cover native allotments, but they also, we're in that incident command center where all the informed. Go ahead. Ways to prevent, basically, we all know that they have burn bans, etc. But almost all the fires last year were started by lightning. Go ahead. This is really important because of this green orange section is contract to the Department of Forestry out of state of Alaska. We don't put on any fires. In fact, our funding doesn't allow us to fund any suppression, like a pump hose or a fire truck or a ground crew. But we do contract through Department of Natural Resources, Forestry, and BLM to call them people that are contracted. Smoke jumpers, those are contracted out. So this is what Tom and Sheila, me or Carla would do, is recommend level of critical, red, full suppression is orange, yellow is modified. I would say that cabin fire would have been a red. It's like here to the TV, you know something's going on. Go ahead. So when I look at trees now, and I agree with our Region 10 forester, that's a fire threat. It's a beautiful picture. It's a beautiful place, looks like, but if a fire started there would be no way to stop it unless we put in a fire break. And if there was a home like that cabin, we'd have to put at least a defense around it. That's what we try to do. So that's us in a nutshell. I'm not looking forward to next year because everybody calls us because they call us for smoke inhalation. Aren't you guys doing something about it? Well, no, we can't. That's a health department issue, but we can help educate. And you know it gets bad when you can't see across the road from the smoke from all the forest fires. So, that's our whole forestry program. There's myself, Carla, and Science Landberg, our supervisor, and we have 8 field foremen, or 2 field foremen and a crew of 8 working in the field. So, any questions? Oh, no. Well, the last one I told you to click on.
I've got a couple of questions. I'm curious if you might be able to speak to, at a time, Non-Dalton had a wildfire response team. And I think that's since been disbanded, but I know that there's interest in trying to rebuild that as a contingency. But I'm just curious, how that fits into all of this, I suppose.
So Non-Dalton does have a fire crew. They have a group of red card trained firefighters, except we can't contract unless we end up with $7 or $9 million budget to fund that fire crew. Unless we change the contract with the federal government, which we can, we just need the funding to provide that service. But right now it's contracted through BLM and DNR, state of Alaska. Here's a fire map of what all the fires, the first one was on Round Island on May 14th. If you remember, smoke jumpers went out, and put out 24 acres of fire on Round Island. And these are the big ones right behind the dump fire in Dillian. That was a catastrophe. It was curved. I mean, it wasn't for the power equipment and the heavy equipment that went out and did the fire breaks, we would have had a catastrophe here. Right behind us is Iwitla. And then, of course, the Cockatoolie, and that one's up. Yeah. So those are the reported fires and what it looked like. And almost all of them were lightning strikes. So,
Not really. Oh, good.
Well, sorry, I was just asking, this is a screenshot then from the end of the fire season?
Yep, the Alaska Energy Coordination Center. Yep.
Yeah.
You get on a website.
This is like great.
Yeah, it's
I'm trying to
alarming.
figure out when you took that, when this.
I think that was when I was, part of our job is to record and log all the fires, so we started compiling this information. By November, I knew we had a problem. We already seen the problem, but it became bigger and apparent how big this problem is, at least last year.
I was just gonna comment to your point. Last year, we made a trip into the falls site and we flew in. It wasn't early in the morning, 9 a.m. I believe, and we witnessed one of those. It's probably the one north and east of Dillingham start, and it was probably smaller than a baseball diamond. When we flew over, we spent the day at the site and came back. By the time we were on our way back, it was about a half mile wide and moving. It just over the course of the day, and the smoke projection was amazing just from what we saw. And that one continued to burn throughout the summer, but it was impressive to see just the change over the course of that day.
I've been in close quarters in the fire, like you've seen in the pictures, and it's like apocalyptic almost. And I can't imagine one going through Dillingham, Nurka, Lake Road, even downtown here. I mean, yeah. There we are. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, other than this quick survey, that concludes our activities, I do believe.